Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been seeing about the rise of the early Pandyas and saw how its first ruler, Nedunchezhiyan alias Nedunderchezhiyan, occupied Koodal on the banks of the river Vaigai. The Pandyan kingdom that was confined to the banks of the river Porunai, that is today's Tamarabarani, in the port city of Korkai, with this occupation got a foothold in the basin of the Vaigai river. And K.N. Sivaraja Pillai, in his The Chronology of the Early Tamils, considers Nedunchezhiyan I to be the first ruler of the early Pandya dynasty. He gains this fame by being the ruler who established Pandya rule in the city of Koodal, that was later renamed as Madurai, the famed city that brought glory to the Pandyas. And in a Sangam poem, Paranar records how even at that early time, Nedunchezhiyan I had to face the might of the two other great warriors of the Chera and Chola dynasty. In an Agananuru poem, he sings, "Mai ani யானை மரப்போர் செழியன் பொய்யா விழவின் கூடல் பரந்தலை உடன் இயைந்து எழுந்த இரு பெரு வேந்தர் கடல்மருள் பெரும்படை கலங்கத்தாக்கி இறங்கு இசை முரசம் ஒழிய பரந்து அவர் ஓடுபுறம் கண்ட ஞான்றே ஆடுகொள் வியன்கழுத்து ஆர்ப்பினும் பெரிதே." In the battle of Koodal Parandale, mounted on his royal elephant, Nedunchezhiyan I fought with the Iruperu Vendar. Here, because of the usage of the term Vendar, it is very clear that the aggressors were the Cheras and the Cholas, who even at that early stage must have felt threatened with the Pandyan occupation of Koodal, given its strategic position on the banks of the Vaigai. And in that battle, Nedunchezhiyan I fought them off, so much so that these kings are shown by Paranar as having made a hasty retreat, even leaving behind their por murasu, the war drums, much to the amusement of the Pandya army. These are the only glimpses we get of this first early ruler of the Pandya dynasty, Nedunchezhiyan I. And second in line comes the king Bhuda Pandyan. He conquered and annexed a neighboring territory known as Vollayur, which at that time was under the rule of the chieftain Vollayur Kiran Mahan Perinchatan. A heart-wrenching poem sung by Kudavayil Keerathanaar in Purananuru on the death of this chieftain in this aggression talks about the munificence and bravery of Perinchatan. Well, the establishment of the empires of the triumvirate were built on the tombs of many a great chieftain who were praised by the Sangam poets. And this annexation of Vollayur brought the Pandya ruler the honorific title of Vollayur Tanda Bhuda Pandyan. Bhuda Pandyan in turn seemed to have faced aggression from his neighboring rulers, and his determination to subdue them and hold on to the seat of Koodal is revealed in a poem sung by the king himself. Both the king and his queen, Bhuda Pandyan Devi Perungoppendu, were Sangam poets. Initially, the Pandya king was ruling over a smaller territory, smaller than even that of the neighboring province of the Ai kingdom, and the admiration that the king had for his contemporary Ai ruler, Ai Thidiyan, is brought about in the Agananuru poem 25 that begins, Nedunkarai Kanyatru Kadumpunal Sa Ai. And the king sings, Melliya Iniya Kuri Valle Varuvar Vali Tholi, Porunar Selsamam Kadanda Vilkelu Tadakkai, Podir Chelvan Polandir Thidiyan, Innisai Iyathin Karangum, Kalmisai Aruviya Kaadu Irandore. The Tholi, the confidant, consoles the heroine who is pining for the hero who has gone in search of wealth across the Podiyil hills. Here, the royal poet adds the epithet Podir Chelvan to describe Ai Thidiyan, and KNS notes that coming from a king of Bhuda Pandyan standing, this was testimony to the fact that the neighboring Ai kingdom was much larger at that point of time than the territory ruled by the Pandyas that was limited to a small portion of the Vaigai river valley. Ai Thidiyan was the successor of Ai Aindiran, about whom we saw in the previous episode. Aithidian's fame is also sung by Paranar. A number of chieftains such as Anji of Gudirai Malai, Pari of Parambu Malai, Wori of Kolli Malai and Kari of Mullur appear in this generation. All these forest chiefs' territories should be located near the northern borders of the Kongu country, which included in its extent the southern corner of Mysore and a part of the Salem district. It is sad how the aggressions of the triumvirate saw to the end of most of these forest chieftains, and KNS opines that the two chieftains Pari and Ori were killed in this generation. In a Puram poem 71, the king Budha Pandian sings what is known as a Vanjinam, a subdivision of the Tinai called Kanji, Kanji itself being a Tinai that stressed the need to procure fame for one's lineage, as in this transient world where everything perished, it was one's fame alone that ensured the continuance of one's name. And a subdivision of this is Vanjinam. Tolgapiyar defines it as follows: Innadu Pizhaipin idu Aagiyar ena Thunnarum Sirappin Vanjinathanum in Purathinai. Vanjinam, a Thurai, denoted the curses that would befall a person if he failed to meet certain victories or milestones. Madangalin Sinai Madanga Ullathu Adangathane Vendar Udangu Yeindu Ennodu Porundum Enba Avare Aramar Alarat Taki Therodu Avarpuram Kanenayin Siranda Peramar Unkan Ivalinum Piriha. The kings will come to fight with me like angry lions, and I will make them run back with their chariots. Here again, since the term Vendar is used, it alludes to the rulers of the neighboring Chola and Cheras, who at that time had grown more in stature than the Pandyas. If I fail to do this, let me be separated from my wife, the one with the beautiful big coal-rimmed eyes. And the poem continues, Arannilai Tiriya Anbin Avayathu Thiran il Oruvanai Nati Murai Thirindu Melikol Seiden Aguha. If I failed, I would have done injustice to the righteous Pandya court, for then I would have allowed a tyrant, a ruler, unfit to sit in that seat, a ruler who didn't even know the meaning of righteousness. Then come the lines, Malipugal Vaiyai Soolnda Valangelu Vaipin, Poyya Yanar Mayyar Koman Mavanum, Man Eil Andayum, Uraisal Anduvan Chatanum, Adan Arisiyum, Venjina Iyakkanum, Ulapada Pirarum, Kanpol Nanbir Kedirodu Kalanda, In Kadi Mahil Nahai Iliki Yan Ondro. If I fail, let me lose the friendship of Mavan, the neighboring ruler of Mayal. Here, Mayal is shown as a fertile region surrounded by the river Vaihe. The king continues, let me lose the friendships of the chieftains, Andai with his invincible fortress, Anduvan Chatan, Adan Arisi and the furious Iyakkan. Man Padai Kakum Neelkudi Chiranda, Tenpulan Kavalin Uriyi, Pirar Vanpulang Kavalin Mariyan Pirake. If I fail, let me be born in my next birth, not in the Pandya clan, but in a lonely clan that guards barren lands. I would like to thank and acknowledge the great service to Tamil rendered by Dr. M. Prabhakaran, who has given beautiful commentaries for all the Purananuru poems in his blog, the link to which I will leave in the description box. What is more interesting in this poem is the tone in which he describes the neighboring chieftains who were clearly his peers and friends and not his tributary chiefs. They must have been ruling over different provinces on the banks of the Vaiyai, while the Pandya rule at that time was limited to the regions of Kudal and Korkai. Thus, his predecessor Nedunjeliyan I had just about occupied Kudal and formed a base from which the Pandya line was to take forward a huge territorial expansion. But in this aggression, Budha Pandian loses his life, and his queen, Budha Pandian Devi Perungopendu, decides to end her life by entering his funeral pyre. While her courtiers try to prevent her, she sings a heart-wrenching poem which is found in Purananuru. Under the Poduviyal Tinai, The Thurai, that is the subdivision, is called Anandapayyul, where a nobleman passes away and his kith and kin surround him and bemoan his death, or when a wife bemoans the death of her husband and decides to join him. So, such was the common prevalence of this practice that this was included as a Thurai. And the poem goes, Palsan rire, selga enach solladu ozhiga ena vilakkum, polla soolchi palsan rire. The queen addresses her courtiers, O noble men who plot to prevent me from entering my husband's funeral pyre. The next lines capture the hard life that a widow had to endure in those days, of how they had to live by strict rules that even prescribed what they could and could not eat. Anil vari kodungai vaal polunditta kaal pol nal vilar narunai தீண்டாது அடையிடை கிடந்த கைப்பிழி பிண்டம் வெள்ளெள் சாந்தொடு புழிப்பெய்து அட்ட வேளை வெந்தை வல்சியாக பரல் பெய் பள்ளிப்பாய் இன்று வதியும் உயவல் பெண்டிரேம் அல்லேம் மாதோ. A fistful of broken rice cooked not with ghee but in tamarind water, together with a paste made out of white gingerly. Eating this and sleeping on a bed made of stones. This is the life of the Vivalam Pendir, the noble widow. Well, I'm not one of them. Rather than live such a life, the queen preferred to join her husband in fame and glory by entering his funeral pyre, which she compares to the cool waters of a lotus pond. Cheras gives the period of the reign of Bhuta Pandyan as between 25 Common Era and 50 Common Era, and also mentions that Bhuta Pandyan was probably the son of Nedunchezhiyan I. As third in line comes the most important of the early Pandya kings according to Cheras, the king who went by many names, Pasumboon Pandian, Vadimbalamba Nindra Pandian, the son of Bhuta Pandyan, also known as Nedunchezhiyan II, about whose rule we will continue in the next episode with the early Pandyas. Vanakkam.